I gotta ambush you with some thing you don't want to talk about.
I swear to God, if you ask me about chemtrails, I'll walk out.
Okay, but
I'm leaving.
there's your clip. Are you recording? Hey everyone, I'm Steven Hale from the Nashville Banner. I'm here with my colleague Sarah Grace Taylor, who has been on all the podcasts in the past week, it seems like. What is this, like your third or fourth podcast?
Yes, but you're special.
Thank you. Well, this is the only one I listen to anyway. Of course, you've been talking to a lot of people about our recent story that you published with a couple of our other colleagues, Stephen Elliott and Araceli, about the THP ICE stops in May. But we're getting together today because you've been back on the Hill where there's more immigration stuff. So what's going on up there?
There are a lot of immigration bills going on this year in the legislature, including a bunch written with the White House. But the two that were kind of central this week are both about reporting on the number of students with different immigration statuses in public schools.
Got it. There were other bills related to immigration and education, some of which haven't moved forward, right? Like we're getting toward the point in the session where some things are falling off or being delayed or deferred or killed for the year, and then other things are progressing.
So the lingering education bill that you might be thinking of is House Bill 793, which is from last year, and that was the bill that would have challenged Plyler v. Doe and allowed school districts to charge tuition to or ban students based on their status. That bill did progress this week, but only after it was gutted with an amendment.
Got it. So what are the basics of what it is now? It's basically not going to do what it was before?
Yeah, so the House Leader, William Lamberth, had this bill last year that passed in the Senate, was very controversial, would have challenged a Supreme Court case, but then he stalled it on the House side because the fiscal note said, hey, you might lose $1 billion in funding if you go forward with this. So he and I talked a bunch over the last few months, and he was talking to the feds trying to get an answer on like, hey, yeah, you can go with that, we're not going to take your funding. And he never got that assurance. So this week what he did was bring it back to subcommittee in the House, which is like a very heated meeting where he brought this back up, and amend it so that it doesn't do any of that. It doesn't challenge Plyler, it does not keep kids out of school directly, and it doesn't charge anyone tuition, but it requires local schools to track students in aggregate by their status. So it's not going to say, hey, this student is X status, but it is going to say we have X number of students in each kind of status.
Got it. And for people who maybe don't know this, because we've gotten into it with some previous reporting about Nashville specifically and asking them about how they would respond if ICE showed up at a school or was inquiring about students. And at least as of now, like their policy is they're not inquiring about a student's immigration status or their family status when they register for school or when they, obviously there's some documentation or whatever that it takes to register your kid for school, but they're not going the length of saying, what's the citizenship status of your parents?
Right.
And I guess this would require them to do that.
This would require them, and there's another bill that requires them and is harsher. We'll talk about that in a minute. But these bills require all public schools to do that, which is not currently the case. The Republicans who support it say it's a matter of data. They want numbers of how many students are undocumented because they believe, I think Bo Watson used the term undue burden last year to describe people who are not citizens who are attending public schools.
Meaning the government or the state taxpayers are funding education for people who aren't citizens? Is that what they're
That's
argument?
What they say,
Yeah.
Which of course is a flawed argument because immigrants do pay taxes, and we did a story last year pointing out that, in fact, they're less likely to use government resources even though they pay tax, and especially in a state like Tennessee where there is no state income tax, there's nothing that their status prevents them from paying that you and I pay.
The undocumented family whose kid goes to the same school as your kids, they're going to the grocery store and buying groceries and paying sales tax, and they're going to,
and they're paying property taxes.
They're doing all
home
the things still. So it's not actually any different in that way, which I think a lot of people maybe don't realize.
Yeah, but the Republicans who support the bill say we need to do this to track so that we just know how many undocumented students there are for things like ESL and things that might cost money in the schools. that was the argument last year, even before the bill, that would have charged tuition or kept kids out of school, because they're saying that the cost of English second learning education is like something that public schools and students who are documented shouldn't have to effectively pay for. Of course, not every student in ESL is undocumented, and not every undocumented student needs that.
Right.
But the Republicans are saying this is a base to start collecting this data to decide what is not really clear.
Yeah, I guess it sounds like their argument may be, we collect the data, then we can come out and say, this is how much money is being spent on children of undocumented immigrants in Tennessee or what have you.
Right.
I was reminded, knowing that we were going to talk about some of this stuff, of a situation that came up. This would have been more than like 10 years ago now, but I remembered it because at the time I was writing some more about the state legislature and stuff. And there was a bill related to undocumented students getting in-state tuition at like colleges.
Yeah.
And I recall Todd Gardenhire sponsoring this. Like they were supportive of it. I bring it up because there have occasionally been some interesting divisions in the Republican Party, at least then, about these kinds of issues. Todd Gardenhire was by no means like a moderate Republican in a lot of other categories.
Yeah.
I mean, but on this, he was like strongly supportive of this is, this kind of thing. Have you seen any of that this session? Like, are there any kind of interesting inter-party disagreements about these policies?
We're not far enough along in this part of the session, so it's a 2-year session. So this year, there hasn't really been any of that. Last year, during the special session around immigration, Todd Gardenhire of Chattanooga brought up his past voting on that and opposed several of the very aggressive immigration bills that passed that week during the special session. And then he got in a fight with Bo Watson, who sponsored the bill, this HB 793 in the Senate side. And he was sponsoring keeping kids out of public schools. And Bo Watson and Gardenhire represent the same area and have been friends for a long time. I covered both of them when I worked in Chattanooga. And they got in an emotional fight, and Gardenhire was crying at one point during committee meetings last year. So there is still some tension. I mean, Gardenhire had also brought a bill last year that would say ICE and immigration enforcement weren't allowed within a certain radius of schools, churches, places kids are going to be. So there is certainly some of that sentiment that exists. I think with a watered-down bill like this, where it's tracking, which, of course, advocates say will have a chilling effect and keep people out of schools anyway.
Right.
But since it's not so directly aggressive at children, I think you're less likely to see Republicans break from the party on this bill than the version that was in the session last year.
Not to derail us too much, but I mean, do you know why Todd Gardenhire feels the way he does about this?
I mean, we've talked about it, and he just, I think he doesn't think children should pay, and this is like kind of a common conversation that came up this week on the Hill too, like, should children be responsible even if their parents have done something wrong? And then beyond that, and I don't know, and I don't think he said this quite as overtly, I just don't think that he thinks people immigrating is as offensive of a thing as some of his colleagues do.
Yeah, he's not as agitated about that issue. You were mentioning that there are some other immigration bills that were related to tracking numbers of people and stuff. Tell us about that.
So the other big one related to tracking is House Bill 1711, which is one of the bills that was written with Stephen Miller and introduced by Republican leadership this year. 1711 goes further, and it says publicly funded hospitals, schools, colleges, universities, local governments have to report the status of individuals who come in to receive services. And there's a little argument over whether they mean individuals or not, but reading the language of the bill, despite what they say when they have done testimony on this, it says individuals. So they have to turn that over, and they have to give it to law enforcement. And the most notable part of it is if someone fails to give it to the state's Central Immigration Division, it is a Class A misdemeanor. So that could mean, and it's, again, a little unclear, and there's only been one hearing in the Senate and one in the House so far on this. But it seems like it means that, let's say, a teacher or an educator or someone in one of these institutions doesn't do the reporting requirements they could face misdemeanor charges.
I'm going to say what that sounds like to me. You tell me if you think I'm wrong or misinterpreting or misunderstanding. This is making it a criminal offense for people in these various areas of our public life to not report all the undocumented immigrants that they interact with or come into contact with, like officially or professionally.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the most aggressive interpretation of it, but it seems like that's what the bill could do.
Yeah.
And this is the third time in the last year and the special session where Tennessee state Republicans have introduced a bill that would have a criminal charge for local officials who do something that they find to run afoul of their immigration policies, even with clear immigration policies in place. And this one, I believe, is the first one that has targeted anyone other than just elected officials.
Right, because there was the bill that was aimed at punishments for elected officials who vote in favor of, like, sanctuary policies. Is that right?
Right, which sanctuary policy is so squishy and are already illegal under Tennessee state law. But they were saying if, say, a city council person were to vote in favor of something that could be considered a sanctuary city policy, they would face, again, I think, Class A misdemeanor on that one as well, which includes jail time and a fine. You know, like it's a serious thing. This isn't a speeding ticket.
Yeah.
And I believe that one, and maybe also the Senator Jack Johnson bill that came out this summer that would target people like Nashville Mayor Freddie O'Connell, who allegedly put out information that they shouldn't on immigration officials, like we saw during the May ICE raid. It would accuse them of doxing and also have a criminal charge. But we've seen now Jonathan Skrmetti, the state attorney general, say he can't defend these criminal charges for elected officials. So I'm curious how that will affect this bill was supposed to be heard this week but got deferred. So we really haven't heard a real discussion, a real committee discussion yet on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I take your point that there's some vague language and there's maybe arguments about how or it wouldn't be applied. That I guess is what they're kind of hashing out in some of these committees and things.
And I should say, I said there's been one subcommittee in Senate and House, but the House one got deferred. So there's only been one conversation about this at all, and it's the most preliminary thing that could happen.
But I mean, it definitely sounds like the thrust of this is creating a legal expectation for at least some people to report individuals for being here, like just that they exist, that they are there. Not a suggestion that they're committing some crime or doing something in the moment.
Well, interestingly, there's also a bill in the same suite that would make it a crime to be in Tennessee as an undocumented immigrant if you've had an order of deportation. So they're also trying to make it a crime in a sense that it has not previously been a crime because that's a civil issue.
Right, and I know this can get confusing for people, and it's been confusing for me in the past too, and I've had to have people kind of walk me through it, as I'm sure you have. But yeah, so being in this country, illegally without documentation is not a criminal offense. It's traditionally been a civil offense. There's been cases where a lot of times what I know happens, because we reported on this some as it relates to like federal prosecutors, is people who have been deported and then come back in after having been deported can, rise to a criminal offense. But so you're saying that bill would make it so that if you are here and you've been ordered to be deported, but you either haven't reported to the court or reported to the officials, that itself is a crime.
Right. And just to be really clear, because even you got tripped up on entered and being here,
yes,
to enter the country illegally has been a criminal offense, is a criminal offense.
Yes.
To be here after a visa expires, after asylum, after temporary protected status, whatever happens, which is, we've seen the majority of people who get caught up in the immigration system, that's how it happens. That is civil. It's not traditionally been civil. It is civil. It still is. Mm-hmm. Tennessee is now complicating that, and I think would be the first state to have a criminal thing. Because again, there's no such thing as a citizen of Tennessee, right? We don't have citizenship. States can't convey citizenship. This is a federal thing that the state is now trying to penalize. Mm-hmm. That has traditionally been civil, which is just such a murky legal ground, but would further complicate. So if you have to report somebody at a school or at a hospital or whatever that looks like, now they're committing a crime technically if this bill were to pass, and it's the amount of changes that could happen to immigration and what you have to report and to who you have to report it. Never mind whatever your moral belief on whether these bills should pass is. It's going to be immensely complicated, and it's going to require an investment to get people like school administrators trained on reading this paperwork that confuses immigration attorneys and figuring out people's statuses.
Yeah, teachers have their job is too straightforward and simple now, so
When we're saying teachers, it's probably administrators.
Adding some more responsibilities to it. But yeah, I appreciate your clarification about my mix-up, and I will add a clarification too, which is, because there's been some debate in presidential campaigns about this before, that crossing the border illegally is a misdemeanor, I think. So it's a criminal offense, but not a massive one. And then, but just kind of being here when you're not supposed to be anymore is a civil offense. And have we touched all the bills, or is there more? Is there another immigration bill we haven't talked about?
I mean, there are like 9.
Sure, but I mean, as far as one that's kind of like...
On reporting, it's 1711, which is the new one that we haven't really heard as much about, that has the criminal charge. And then 793, which is Lamberth's kind of carryover bill from last year. And this week, that one passed in subcommittee, and there were hundreds of protesters at the Capitol. There were educators, there were students. There were students crying at a protest or a press conference afterward, and teachers hugging and crying the students. And one teacher from Memphis said overtly that he wouldn't comply, even knowing about the criminal charge. So it's pretty heated.
Yeah, meaning he would refuse to document what kids in his class are, what status or whatever.
Right.
As you've been on the Hill the past, week or two after the big investigation that you worked on came out about the May raids, I'm curious what kind of any of the discussion has been while you've been up there in the hallway.
Yeah, I mean, we posted out on a Thursday morning, and that same Thursday morning on the Senate floor, Senator Jeff Yarbrough was like reading from it and talking about it. There's been a lot of conversation from Democratic lawmakers about it during budget hearings for the Tennessee Highway Patrol, which were, I'm sure in their minds, really poorly timed, that happened right after this. Democratic lawmakers in both the Senate and House asked questions about what happened. And from that, it was kind of interesting because apparently no one knew about it. Like, we can't get an answer from the governor, who I asked directly about it last week. We can't get an answer from high-ups in DHS or the THP about who knew about this. We know that the feds asked, but we still don't know who gave the okay. And they say that this Central Immigration Division wasn't part of it, which seems hard to wrap your head around when you know that organization had just formed. So I guess whatever conversation around that story has just raised a lot more questions that we don't have answered.
Yeah, and just to emphasize for people who listening who may not understand this or not know this, this is the thing that for us, trying to report on these things is such a glaring difference about what's happening right now. Is, if the police in Nashville have some big operation and arrest someone, yeah, they're not walking us through every detail of it necessarily, or not right away, but it's more or less a public thing, whether they send out an announcement or if you call them up, they'll say, here, here's what we did and who we arrested and why we did it. And basically the charges are public, all that stuff. And the complete lack of information that, I know you and our colleagues and other reporters everywhere have been able to get about a lot of these things is I guess what I'm saying is, if it seems like reporters or people talking about this are, kind of hair on fire, it's partly because just there's no one answering questions about what is actually happening, why it's happening, who it's happening to, and that's a change.
Well, and I think to tie it back to the ledge, all of these bills that require participation with local law enforcement or require local law enforcement to participate with the feds will result in maybe not as broad of an operation as what you're talking about, which was the 600 stops last May, but more feds taking people off the street in Tennessee. That is just what the goal is. That's what's going to happen. And when we see how opaque it is, and if the Tennessee State Highway Patrol is worse than Metro about sharing information, it's exponentially more true between THP and the feds. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard for us to know what happened. And that's the part where it's again, whatever you think of whether they should be arresting these people or deporting these people, we don't know. We know that they gave us bad, false information at the time last year, and it took us 9 months to even get what we got. Mm-hmm. So any amount of intensity that we have in covering it on the front end right now is to try to be prepared for whatever's going to happen, because we know that they're not going to be forthcoming.
Right. Yeah, and it occurs to me that another thing we were talking about, that if people are kind of following this issue less closely, may not have made sense. But the reason I even brought up the notion that being here when your visa is expired or when your status is not a crime is because that is a big part of what has changed. When you talk about people getting quote unquote arrested off the street, and we're seeing these videos in the past few weeks, there's been ICE activity detaining people in Nashville. You'll notice they're not showing up at someone's house and giving them a slip of paper that says, hey, your visa's expired and we know it and you need to be at court this day, like you would imagine a civil matter might be handled. It's people getting, put on the ground and detained and put in a car and driven away. I mean, it is very different from that. So that's why the distinction that this has not heretofore been treated like a criminal matter is I think worth saying because of that. We're going to let you go. I want to know how many weeks left, let's do like a Groundhog Day sort of situation. Like how many more weeks of the session? How many more weeks until sine die? One of my favorite terms in state politics.
No idea. Last year was end of April, but they were trying to get out before the Cassidy hearing, so they wrapped up pretty tight. But this year they have to finish all
There's no federal trial approaching that can rush them out?
Not that we know of yet.
Too soon to say.
But they have to finish all the business from last year and this year because it is the end of the 2-year session.
Right.
So anything that doesn't get done is done. You have to bring it back. These bills die at the end of the session. So that means something, but it's also an election year. So people are trying to get out and go campaign. But then we had the snow week where we lost like a week of... So I've been trying to guess because I would like to take some time off. But I have no idea when they're going to be done. It could be the end of April. It could go into May. I'm hoping last week of April, but... Got it.
And just to clarify, neither of us have put any money on this, on the prediction markets, if this is a thing. We're not on Kalshi or Polymarket betting on when the session will end. But I bet it might be possible that people could.
I feel very strongly about the proliferation of gambling, particularly around current events.
And that's that you think it's good and it should continue?
Yeah, it's going to save society. That's what I think.
Well, I think that's as good a place to end as any, unless you have something else to add about
I don't know, maybe
bills.
Buy Tesla stock like Jack Johnson did if you're looking for a way to gamble.
There you go. People can check that out. Our friends at the Nashville Scene had a story about that. You had an item about that in our newsletter, which you can subscribe to at NashvilleBanner.com. She's Sarah Grace Taylor. You can follow her on social media, various places, Blue Sky, Instagram. Same with me. We're a production of the Nashville Banner, and we're produced by Andrea Tudhope. Listen to us next time. I don't appreciate you making it seem like you don't want to talk about chemtrails, though, because every time we've talked about them, except for when we talked about it on
when you brought it up on an unrelated podcast, which is what would be happening
been very
again
enthusiastic. I've been reined in by the corporate overlords. It's okay. I won't bring it up anymore.